Episode of the SDSU podcast is sponsored by Marz Energy Cream, the first ever topical energy delivery product. Think energy drink, but it's a lotion. It contains a proprietary blend of natural ingredients, including caffeine, taurine, and B vitamins, to provide an energizing boost. And unlike traditional energy drinks and gels, Marz Energy Cream is sugar-free, contains no artificial flavors, colors, or preservatives. If you want to try it out, go to marzenergydrinkcream.com and use the code Andre, spelled ANDRE, at checkout to receive 15% off a purchase of a 50 milliliter tube. You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the SDSU podcast. I am your host, Andre Hagverdian. We'll be joined shortly by my co-host, Paul Garrison. Today's episode is a basketball one, as we got a chance to interview Chris Acker, the assistant coach for San Diego State basketball. Right now, even though we're in the midst of the football season, college basketball is about 2 months away. The Aztecs' first game is November 6th against Cal State Fullerton. They'll put up their banners for their Mountain West regular season, their Mountain West tournament, and Final Four banners on that night. We wanted to get a chance to talk to some of the coaches and the players leading up to the first game in the next 2 months. And Chris Acker was up first. He's been the assistant coach at San Diego State for 4 years, and he's seen a lot of success, from the first year team, the 26-0 team with Malachi Flynn and those guys. Unfortunately, didn't get a chance to play in the NCAA tournament due to COVID. Some other regular season and conference tournament champions, and then obviously last year getting to the championship game. So it was fun to talk to him, get his perspective on what last year's journey meant to him, and also what he thinks about how the team might look this year with having to replace so many key veterans from last year's team and new freshmen, redshirt freshmen, true freshmen, and transfers that are going to be a part of the rotation this year. So let's get to this interview, and then Paul and I will be back to give our takeaways before we close it out. We want to welcome San Diego State assistant basketball coach Chris Acker to the podcast. How are you doing today, Coach?
I'm doing great, man. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, it's the start of the fall semester. How has the start of the semester treated the staff and getting back into the swing of things?
It's been really good. Seeing all the people on campus and seeing the excitement and the energy around campus has been awesome. And so, we segued into a little recruiting, bringing guys on campus for official visits and everything. And then, our guys working out alongside of that. It's been a really, really good transition back into the start of the season. But, you always want a little bit more rest.
Absolutely. We know last year, obviously, San Diego State made it all the way to the NCAA championship game against UConn. Can you put into words what that experience was like for you?
Sure. It was just, I guess the cliche word would be exciting, but it was all encompassing. There were so many different emotions that, go through your mind when you're experiencing something like that, because you only dream of that as a coach. And I'm sure the players, you only dream about having those moments as players as well. And so for it to happen and come to fruition is surreal, because it's a moment that, you can celebrate with everyone, your family, your friends, alumni, the team. And then, internally, you're just looking at your past and all the things you've accomplished as a coach. And then to know that you coached, arguably one of the best teams you've ever coached in your life, and you were fortunate enough to be a part of them advancing into the ultimate game and playing in the last game of the year, is something that, you can only dream about and hope for. And the coolest thing about it is we got to the last game of the year and we all just looked at each other and we said, you know what, no matter what, no one else is playing another game, so let's just let it rip. And so going out there with that mentality, knowing that, that next day was all over anyway, it was unbelievable.
Because you've got the opportunity to reflect and to do all the things you just mentioned. Outside of Lamont Butler's buzzer beater, is there a moment that comes back to you that you kind of has resonated with you more?
The most impressive thing is that our identity as a program was kind of on display during that moment because it started with a block shot, a defensive stop. And that's the identity of our program is we defend ultimately to win basketball games. And we don't rely heavily on, we want the ball to go in on offense when we call a play. We want it to work perfectly and we want to make the shot. But at the end of the day, when that's not happening, we tend to rely heavily on our defense to come up big for us. And the fact that we got to the point where they had to call a timeout because we denied the entry pass. And then, we guarded them to the point to where they shot a shot with more time on the clock than they thought that they had on the clock. And then AG blocked the shot. We secured the ball and then outletted it to Lamont. And then to see the guys, calmly jog down the floor and then to see Lamont go between his legs, and something we always talk about from an offensive standpoint when you just talk conceptually is about spacing. And Micah was at the top of the key and he moved away from Lamont as Lamont went between his legs and started going left. And had he been moving towards Lamont, Lamont might not have been open for that shot in that one-on-one scenario. But the fact that he moved away from Lamont gave him the opportunity to have that moment. It was just an unbelievable experience that, obviously will go down in history as one of the greatest shots in college basketball history. But, for everyone in San Diego, I'm sure it'll go down in history as the greatest shot ever made by the Aztecs. So it was a very, very special moment.
Talking with, everyone on the team all last year, preseason, the chemistry was the thing that everyone hit on, how the connection and how special that was between that group. Is that something that can be taught, or does that depend on intangibles that in trying to recapture it for this year may not be in the staff's control?
I don't know if it's something that can be taught. I mean, guys usually either get along or they don't, or they go through different experiences that cause them to get over themselves and start, focusing more on the team. I think it's something that as coaches, you always wish that your team could have great chemistry, but chemistry starts off the floor. I mean, guys got to want to be around each other. And from the last year standpoint, when you were around our team, whether it was, our first MTE out in Maui, away from the court, they were always had some game that they were playing or laughing and joking, or they had music playing in the back of the bus. And they just found a way to make every road trip, every experience together, something that they enjoyed. And it wasn't fake. It was real. And so I think Coach Dutcher does a tremendous job of entrusting guys to lead the program. And I think it's a credit to how we recruit. We recruit high character guys and we try to mesh personalities well together. And I think at that moment, it just blended really, really well. And since I've been here the last 4 years, every team that I've been fortunate to be a part of, players have all gotten along really, really well. And they've all enjoyed each other's company. And they've all been awesome to coach. And so I think chemistry has a lot to do with it. But there's a lot of other things that go into having a run like that as well.
This past Saturday night, the team was celebrated, recognized at Snapdragon Stadium during the football game, received the Final Four rings. Gave an opportunity for some of the guys that are no longer on the team, like Keyshawn Johnson, the Broughton twins, Jared Barnett, to be there. How fun was it to reconnect with those guys again as part of that ceremony?
Well, those guys are just always family. I mean, you could never erase, no matter where those guys go in life and no matter where those guys decide to play. I mean, Keyshawn's at Arizona, Jared's at Northridge, and the Broughton twins are also at a four-year university as well. So just seeing them, it was special because, again, you talk about chemistry, you look over and it was like those guys had never left the program. Everyone was excited to see him. And so, again, that's just kind of the element of what we have going on at San Diego State. Guys really enjoy being around each other, and it starts with the leadership at the top, all the way from the administration, all the way down to Coach Dutcher and his assistant coaches and, our support staff. We just all enjoy each other's company, and, it's always special when you can get together over receiving a championship ring.
Yeah, you mentioned your 4 years at San Diego State. That first year you were here was that, the undefeated year, or the last team to be undefeated, the 2019-2020 team with Malachi Flynn. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to see what that team would do in the tournament, but we know that team was top 5 in the country leading up to the COVID shutdown. How would you compare that team to this past season's team?
I wouldn't compare them at all, to be honest. It's totally different teams. I just think, every team is different. That team was special in its own right, and we can only wonder what would have happened had we had the opportunity to play in the NCAA tournament. But what I will say is that team was arguably another one of the greatest teams to ever play at San Diego State. And to finish that season 30-2, to start off the season 26-0, they really did a great job. Of the president here at San Diego State is already set, but they did a great job carrying on the legacy of the guys in the past and continuing to move this thing forward. And without them, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to do what we did this past season. And it was really cool to see Malachi and Jordan, and I know Yanni, he was hitting us via WhatsApp, seeing those guys and hearing from those guys during that run is what it's all about. So again, I won't compare them, but I'll say that team was a huge reason why we were even in the position that we were in to do what we did last season.
Heading into this upcoming year, there's obviously a big void to replace so many, great players, from Matt Bradley, Adam Seiko, Nathan Mensah, AG, Kishad. I mean, where do you think the biggest impact will be felt from losing that group this upcoming season?
It'll always be a learning curve defensively. I mean, all of those guys were older guys, mature guys. They understood, body positioning. They understood, how important each possession was down the stretch of basketball games from a defensive standpoint. So Nathan Mensah, arguably, and I only say arguably because Lamont's right there with him, but arguably the best player in the Mountain West over the last 4 or 5 years, defensive player. And so when you lose a guy like that defensively, when you lose the experience of AG and Matt Bradley and Adam Seiko and guys like that, you just hope that these new guys and the guys that are transitioned from last year to this year can step up and fill those voids. But I would say, obviously defensively, that's where we're going to have to pick up the majority of the slack.
And trying to go through some of the guys who are going to have to fill that void. Love to talk about some of the transfers, but starting first, you have some young guys, Miles Bird, Elijah Saunders, DeMarshe Johnson. I mean, what have you seen from them over the summer, growth in their game and trying to replace the guys that we just talked about?
Well, Miles Bird, Elijah Saunders, and DeMarshe Johnson, DeMarshe's been here longer than those two, but all of those guys last year were on that team. And so whether or not if they were playing in those games or had a chance to play at the end of the game, whatever the case may be, whatever minutes or opportunities they got, they were there in every aspect of practice and everything that we did. So our expectations for them is a lot higher in the sense that they understand what it looks like. So, we're expecting big things from them. They've done a tremendous job of getting in shape, getting stronger, and they're very receptive to coaching. And so, they're able to be out there and make a few more plays instinctually than some of the freshman guys just because they've been in the program. But BJ Davis and Miles Heide both in their own right have come in right away as freshmen, and they've impacted our practices just with their ability to compete on a day-to-day basis. And when you think about freshmen, the number one thing you want them to do is hold their own and compete, not back down. And those two guys have definitely done that.
You've also got two transfers, Reese Waters and Jay Powell. We heard Matt Bradley, Darian Trammell talk about how it took them almost a year as transfers to fully acclimate their games to what San Diego State does. Because there was, a lot of established players around them that they were trying to fit in with. Is there a chance that Waters and Powell can transition quicker because in some ways there's more openings with all the guys that left this past year?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're getting a ton of reps right now. And so, I think for them, it just comes down to an aggression level and an assertiveness when they're out there on the floor. And both those guys have tried to, err on the side of aggression. And that's all you can ask for. And so when it'll click and when it'll happen, I have no idea. But they're transitioning in the right direction. If they continue to be aggressive and they continue to be assertive and they continue to learn and soak things up from the returning guys and the coaching staff, they're going to be on track to help us win a lot of basketball games this upcoming season.
Cade Alger was a walk-on over the last couple of years. He was just granted a scholarship by Coach Dutcher, a guy that's worked through the scout team and earned this recognition. What has he meant to the program since he has been here?
Oh, man, he's been, we treat everybody in our program the exact same in the sense that everyone has a role that they have to come in and do that role at the highest level every single day. And Cade's the epitome of that. He gave us everything he had the last couple of years that he's been here, scout team, and he's made an impact and helped us prepare for multiple games. So he's well deserving of that scholarship, and he's going to be an impact guy this year in terms of whatever we ask him to do. And so those are the type of guys you need to have success, and I couldn't be happier for Cade.
Coach, one of the things that is kind of a hallmark of Coach Dutcher and the way that you all build your team is, it's very player-centered, and it evolves as the season goes on. Last year, there was a lot of two-post offense, especially after that Arizona game in Maui where, you kind of figured some things out. Is it early enough to kind of see what the identity of this team is going to be offensively?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's about evolving as the year goes on, and our defense gives us an opportunity to do that because that's never going to change. We're always going to compete defensively and give ourselves a chance to win. And that allows us to look at things offensively and see where we can be more efficient and effective as the season is going on. And so, right now we are just scratching the surface on how good we're going to be offensively. But we have a lot of talent, and we have some shot making, and we have some confidence and some swagger to us. So, I think we got a chance to maybe shoot the ball better, be a little bit more efficient offensively than we have been. But at the end of the day, time will tell.
We had the opportunity to speak with Jaden Ledee and his dad for our Father's Day episode. And both of them were talking about their excitement for this upcoming season as, I guess, just the opportunity for Jay to fully be able to show his game. What should we expect from him, and what have you seen about his development and just being able to be his full self on the court?
Yeah, well, I think, in a lot of ways, as the season went on, everyone was able to see a little bit more of what Jaden's capable of. But Jaden's starting to realize now that he's got to become more than just a scorer. I mean, showcasing your total game is your ability to make others better. And he's more than capable of doing that. He's shown that in flashes. And now that the expectation is that he's going to be out there a lot more and not having to necessarily look over his shoulder as much, he's going to have to learn how to continue to make other guys better, make good reads, slow down a little bit so that things can kind of flow because we want to play through him. And he's a tough cover for any defense. And obviously he's a monster on the glass. And so if what we saw towards the end of the season last year is any indication of how good he's going to be for us this season, then I think we're in store for an unbelievable year.
You were talking about the development of the offense and the shooting. Adam Seiko filled that role as kind of the guy that would come off screens looking for 3-point shots. Is there anyone standing out at this point as someone that could replace that role that Seiko filled?
Yeah, I mean, Micah Parrish was unbelievable last season as well. I mean, it coming off screens and pin downs and being patient, and getting his shot off. And with his size, he's going to have so many opportunities to get his shot off. So he's done a tremendous job. Reese Dixon-Waters, another guy that can come off a pin down and make shots. Obviously, Darion Trammell is more than capable of coming off pin downs and making shots. So, like I said before, I think we're going to shoot the basketball a lot better, and guys are going to be much more comfortable because you mentioned before how the transition is from a guy that's just transferring in. Now that we've had Darion and Micah in the program for a year, they should be much more comfortable in their own skin this season. So I expect big things from those two guys as well this year.
Lamont Butler, we obviously talked about his shot at the end of last season, the way he finished the season. He tested the NBA waters over the summer, decided to come back, but he talked about how that process, really helped his game, gave him feedback on what he needs to work on. Where do you see Lamont's game progressing to this season?
Well, I think he's going to be more of a general. And I think over time, as he's played the position, I mean, people don't realize that last year was his first opportunity since he's been here to be the point guard, the sole point guard when he's on the floor. Because prior to last year, he was always in the backcourt with Trey Pulliam, who was an unbelievable point guard for us. But Trey had the ball in his hands a ton. And so, I think this season, Lamont becoming more of a general in terms of moving people with his voice. He's done a great job this offseason of focusing in on that. And I think that was a lot of the feedback that he heard when he was testing the waters. And so I think that's the biggest part of his game. That's going to be the evolution for Lamont is can he move people with his voice? Because his game has slowed down tremendously. He's playing with more pace. He understands when to pick and choose his spots a little bit better. So, again, it's going to be the leadership aspect, and can he get guys to respond when he's talking?
Coach, you mentioned losing Nathan Mensah. I think that as with all of the great defensive players who've come through San Diego State, I'm not sure there's anyone more unique than Mensah and his ability to cover 1 through 5. And to say that there's not a player like Mensah on this upcoming year, I think you could say that about every single year that he hasn't been on campus. He's just so unique. Will the defense look different potentially because you don't have such a unicorn of a player that you can build around?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're going to find that we're going to have to take more charges and be more willing to sacrifice our bodies a little bit more, not having that veteran anchor in the back. There's a reason why the Charlotte Hornets decided to, invest in Nate because he is an exceptional defender first and foremost. And then, for us, we're just going to have to continue to grind and continue to find ways and help guys improve in that area of the floor. And as talented as Nate was, defense is something that you can, in terms of effort, energy, and mentality, that's something you can bring out of guys. And so I don't know if they'll be Nathan Mensah, but the guys that are going to be back there anchoring the defense this year, I think they're willing to try to do everything in their power to be really good back there so that they can help us win games. And they understand that the importance level for us is at an all-time high because, again, that's how we hang our hat on the defensive end.
Coach, last question for us. JD Pollock announced that he was going to be stepping into the business world. Could you just talk about, his impact and just, I guess, a little bit of that dynamic with the staff change?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about our organization is that, Coach Dutcher is tremendous when it comes to family. And so, JD Pollock was a part of our family. And so we appreciated the fact that every single day he would give us knowledge and input on what he thought and what he felt. He would be in the office and he'd have opinions based on the film he watched. And, he'd help us on a day-to-day basis just with structuring guys and making sure that they were where they were supposed to be. And, he made an impact on, AG and Nathan and, really connected with those guys and helped them from the standpoint of academics and just anything they needed off the court. And so anytime you lose somebody that you consider family, it's always difficult. And so, we're looking to transition here in a little bit. And when we do, I think we're going to, make a great hire and have somebody that can try to fill that void. But, JD brought a unique approach to what he did every single day. And we're definitely going to miss him. And we wish him and his family nothing but the best because, again, we want to support him and let him know that, part of why we were able to make a run like that was because of his, input, impact in what we were doing every single day.
Coach, as always, we appreciate your time. Thank you for hopping on and answering some questions. I know all of Aztec Nation is excited to get the season on track in early November and see how this team does this season.
I appreciate it, man. It's going to be a fun season, and everyone should be excited. Hopefully we can play elite defense and get out and run and, just really, really try to do as close as we can to what we did last year. But as always, we're going to take it one day and one game at a time.
Awesome. Have a great night.
All right, you guys too. Thank you.
Episode of the SDSU podcast is sponsored by Marz Energy Cream, the first ever topical energy delivery product. Think energy drink, but it's a lotion. It contains a proprietary blend of natural ingredients, including caffeine, taurine, and B vitamins, to provide an energizing boost. And unlike traditional energy drinks and gels, Marz Energy Cream is sugar-free, contains no artificial flavors, colors, or preservatives. If you want to try it out, go to marzenergydrinkcream.com and use the code Andre, spelled ANDRE, at checkout to receive 15% off a purchase of a 50 milliliter tube. All right, Paul, we're in the midst of a football season.
Yeah.
But we got a chance to chat with a basketball assistant coach, Chris Acker, this week. It was nice a little change of pace, talking basketball after talking football and going through the first two games, getting ready for UCLA and things like that. But, Saturday night at Snapdragon was obviously a celebration, handing out the Final Four rings. Kind of brings back memories of, what happened in March and April for the Aztecs. And we got a chance to ask Coach Acker about that. What did you think his memories and his remembrance of that time was?
It's funny because I think I must have just asked a bad question because I was like, we were trying not to talk about Lamont Butler. And so then he started talking about Lamont Butler. And even though I was trying to get another memory, like I said, bad question. And then I was so glad that he talked about Lamont Butler because I thought he talked about it in a way that like nobody else has talked about really.
The Micah Parrish role?
Yeah, the Micah Parrish role. Obviously starting with defense, the ball movement or the placement, and that they did all those things in that moment that they've been preaching and talking about. I just thought he gave a perspective on it that we hadn't heard. And so I thought that was really, really good. I thought he gave the absolute best answer to your question, trying to compare his first year with the 30-2 team with the Final Four team. I thought he gave the absolute best answer, and I just wish he hadn't.
Yeah.
I was like, come on, make a little comparison, give us something. Because I think that is the some of the more tantalizing, fun questions that they just have no answer. And they're so fun, and to get an expert's kind of take on it would be a lot of fun. I was like imagining when we had done those questions offline, I was imagining saying, okay, well, who covers Malachi? And then, and all those kinds of things that they do with, the ranking the Bulls teams versus, all that kind of stuff. So, but overall, man, I thought it was a dynamite interview, and there's just so much. But what was your first kind of?
Well, I'm not going to be diplomatic.
Okay.
And I'm going to say the 2019-2020 team is way better.
Way better?
I mean, okay, maybe not way better, but they're a better team. They're
Not,
better.
well, good. Give me your reasons because I couldn't disagree with you more.
They're much better offensively. With Malachi Flynn and Yanni Wetzel running the pick and roll, I think their offensive efficiency is a lot better because they've got a point guard that can shoot, that can handle, can assist, could drive. And I think in that's so essential to being successful going down in a tournament. Now, obviously, San Diego State, Lamont and Darion Trammell had great moments. Darion Trammell was, I think, the regional MVP. We all obviously know what Lamont did, but I think offensively that team was better. That better shooting with Shackle, Matt Mitchell, KJ Fagan. They still had great defenders. If Mensa, I mean, that was a year Mensa had his lung issue. I think especially
That's always my question is what do you?
I'm assuming a healthy Mensa.
Okay, so I mean, I think that's a really big piece that has to be discussed. I also think that as we've seen with Malachi Flynn's NBA career, guards with size and athleticism give him problems. And I think that Lamont Butler would have been able to D him up in ways that we didn't see. I also think that, and this is a good segue, actually, I think, to just thinking about the team as a whole. I don't think any of the analytics or any of the things that you can talk about can ever put a price tag on how old they were last year.
Yeah.
And that age of just being so much older than everybody, I think is why they ended up getting there. I think that if you go just pure talent wise, Alabama was way better talent wise than the 30-2 San Diego State Aztecs. But, except for like a stretch in there, the San Diego State dominated that matchup. And I think it was primarily because of that age and that experience. You talk about that team going into making a run into the tournament, but the team that just made the run into the tournament had so much history of losing and getting close and all of that. And I think that bore fruition that 30-2 team didn't have. So I think that, I think analytically, statistically, I think it's very, very true. But I think that the team that played this year, I don't think that was great as Matt Mitchell was. I don't think that he can rebound with Jaden Ledee, and he would be forced to. And I think that would be a huge mismatch. Regardless, we'll never know. But I do think it's a big transition into this year's team and more from Coach Acker. There's all kinds of preseason top 25 out there, and some of them have state, some of them don't. I personally would find it very hard to have them on a top 25. And I am really curious. I am really curious to see, was that because of COVID and all of the guys who got to come back and get that extra year, and that just created for them a team that kind of can't be replicated? And I'll be really interested to see if they can, because I think you could argue that the ceiling of the players who are on this year's team is higher than the ceiling of those. But all of those years playing together, really came to the forefront, I thought, last year.
Yeah, what intrigued me is how he said that he thinks the offense and the shooting is going to be better in this year's team, or could be better. Because I think that was, last year throughout the regular season, they really struggled shooting. They struggled putting points up, and they figured it out and to be able to score enough to win the Mountain West tournament, to get to the championship game. But if their defense slipped up a little bit, then was their offense good enough? So it was a balance. But if their offense can be better, then you're right. I think the ceiling is higher. But is the offense going to be better? Are they going to have those growing pains at the beginning of the season and with implementing all these new guys, Reese Waters and Jay Powell? By the way, it's from what I heard from San Diego State's media relations, it's not Reese Waters. He dropped the Dixon part. He does not want the Dixon part anymore. If you look at their roster online, it does say Reese Waters. I saw some people asking about that. But it's in implementing these guys into the offense. early in the season, and they've got some tough games. This is not an easy, maybe not as hard as last year out of conference schedule, but it's still pretty tough. There's still a few games that they haven't announced yet. That will
we should reserve judgment.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So we'll see where that lands. But if the offense can generate more scoring, easier baskets, that they're not going to be as big and as like muscular inside, but they could be more skilled in terms of on the perimeter and getting to the basket. So it's all unknowns at this point, other than the 4 or 5 guys that are coming back from last year's team that played on last year's team, and then there's a lot of unknowns. But it's exciting because there's a lot of guys that could really step up and bring dimensions to their game that the team didn't have last year.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think the part that I'm most interested in is I think this year's team is different than the last few years, and we alluded to it in our conversation with Coach Acker. And it's different in that I don't think that there are established roles. Nathan Mensah, I still would say was their most important and their best player. He has had at San Diego State, he had his offensive game, and his offensive game, what was his offensive game? And it prevented, I think, some of the stuff that you're talking about with the free flowing stuff and being able to get to the basket and those kinds of things. But he was so dominant and so special and so good on the defensive end that you're not going to not play him. You know what I mean? And so no matter how good Trammell, Ledee, Parrish are on the offensive side, they have to work with what they have with Mensah. Now, you take that out, and then you bring in Waters and Powell, and you get to see like that second year of Trammell, second year of Parrish, Ledee in that role. And I think it's just such a blank canvas, and in many ways they're kind of building from the ground up. I think that there's a chance that those transfers can get acclimated quicker, and I'm really interested to see if that's the case. And I something I'm learning from talking with enough coaches. I think one of the ways that they are different from fans and media is they're way more patient. I used to take the idea of like, he didn't really give us any ideas of other than, hey, we're depending on them. Hey, we need them to be better.
Yeah.
And I used to take that as coach speak, but I really think they haven't made up their mind. There's too much in front of them competition wise. And he knows that if he makes ideas about what they can, that what he thinks they're going to be, that can short circuit like the process of what they're actually becoming. And that patience, I think, you just see it, and I think you kind of have to have it as a coach.
Yeah, you're right. Totally. Part of me wants to ask any of the coaches, like, who's going to be the starting 5? Who's going to be center?
Completely.
Are you going to go, Waters, Parrish, Ledee in the front court? Or are you going to make sure that Ledee's the 4 and there's a big man like a Saunders or a DeMarche or a Heidi? Or is it literally going to be the best 5 players? But I agree. I think he would probably, even if they knew, they would say we don't know, because it's September 5th, right? The first game is 61 days from now, or they probably really don't know. And they're going to let these next 2 months play out and see where they stand. But they've got a lot of options and possibilities. Coach Dutcher isn't one to move the starting lineup around based on who they're playing against. I think I remember asking him that last year when we were trying to figure out who was going to start, because they had so many experienced guys. And I asked him if he would change the lineup based on who they're playing, and he said no. Ultimately, that he likes to have a set lineup, and that's how they roll. But that could change. Coaches evolve too, so who knows? But yeah, that's the most intriguing thing, is who's going to be the starting center, how they're going to play that role, whether it's going to be an interchangeable or they're going to want a defensive big like they've had in Mensah, because that's just worked so well for them. The problem is, do they have that guy on the roster? And they might not.
Absolutely. And I think that they're obviously thinking in that regard. And I think the other intangible that's fascinating about this whole thing is I think the argument that San Diego State should be in the top 25 and should be in these higher rankings. I mean, it's not only like they're like 22nd, people have had them in the top 15, you know. I think the argument that is where they should be is because winning is caught, not taught. These young guys and not only just the young guys, but what does it do for Lamont Butler's career to see that shot go in? You know what I mean? And just being able to win, to go up against Alabama and the number 2 pick in the draft and win. What does it do being in that locker room for all of those games for, Miles Byrd? And, I think until something more tantalizing comes out in the off season, I mean, when you asked Coach Dutcher at the press conference, about Saunders and about Byrd, and, Lamont Butler has that like look on his face of like, yeah, you like I think everyone else is going, whoa, what's Miles, okay.
Yeah.
And so I think there is that excitement, and like does being around that and Coach Acker alluded to it, does being around what happened just gives them some intangible things about winning that you can't teach and you can't have otherwise, and they're just going to be elevated and be winners because of that, and thus they should be in the top 25. So I thought all of that stuff was really, really fascinating. I mean, there's so many questions. There's so many questions about, where does Waters fit in terms of being able to share the ball with Darian Trammell, Matt Mitchell and Darian Trammell, for all the talk of them working well together. Like, you didn't really see very many games where both of them had it going. They seemed like in the NCAA tournament, they even kind of switched off games,
Yeah.
and it worked really, really well. And can that same dynamic work that way? For all of Lamont Butler and all of his accolades, well deserved for hitting, I think Coach Acker said it right, the biggest shot in San Diego history. It shouldn't be forgotten that he was a substitution on the offensive end all the way leading up before that shot. And he was not that offensive player. And so they're wanting him to be that floor general. They're wanting him to kind of take command. And so that's really, really an interesting, development in his game and where that's at. But I just thought overall, I thought that it's great to hear all the things that they said about the new players and the freshmen and et cetera.
Well, going back to that comment about Butler, like when AG blocked the shot and Mensa got the rebound, what did Jim Nantz say? Like, yeah. All their offensive players are not on the court. None of their offensive players are on the court. Are they going to call a timeout to get them in? And while Lamont Butler is racing down court. So, I think the one player that I'm most intrigued by is Elijah Saunders. He got very limited playing time last year, but even when he did get in, he really didn't look and feel comfortable in the role that he was in. But his body composition this year, just how much the weight he's lost and the muscle he's put on, and he was already athletic. He was a guy who could jump out of the gym already, and now I can see him being even more athletic. His improved skill set, I think he can definitely be someone that the team, and he might be part of that reason where Coach Acker is saying we could be better offensively because we've got some guys that are more skilled offensively, either around the basket or on the perimeter. So I'm intrigued by a lot of guys. Miles Byrd obviously is another guy, but if Reese Waters, Jade Powell, we don't know too much about Jade Powell just because we didn't really watch him from where he came from. There's not a lot out there about him, so I'm intrigued by him too. But Elijah Saunders is that one player where I'm gonna say I think he could put a stamp on this team, and that can elevate the ceiling on this team that people might not be looking at or considering right away.
The player that I felt like he offered the most insight on was Jaden Ledee. The article that I wrote after prior to the interview that we had with them, I was trying to kind of okay, what is he talking about? What have we seen? And you go through with him as a point guard, as his dad eloquently said, and I thought that Coach Acker talked about his ability to make everybody around him better. And you got to be more than just a scorer. And I know there were times last year where he would get the ball at the top of the key and like his mind was scoring and guards could come and pick his pocket from behind him because he just lost sight of where his teammates were and all of that. And so I think going back to that full game and being able to have that full game, it is making people better, getting them to their spots. And if that shooting is there, that, Coach Acker is talking about, where you have all these guys on the perimeter who can shoot, that should open up everything that Ledee does very, very well. And then it's going to force teams to have to figure out how to double him. And then he's got to be able to find those open players. And so I thought that was very, very insightful. And it's a challenge. Like he's absolutely right. He can't be just a guy who can put the ball in the basket, but he's got to be somebody who can make everybody better. And that's where Jaden Ledee becomes special. I think, he has the skill set to average in double digits, but the quality of those double digits, I think it is what remains to be seen. I think just by being out on the court, he's going to score in double figures, He's going to average that just as long as he stays healthy and he's out there on the court. But, there's just a difference. And you were alluding to it at the very, very, very beginning. San Diego State has had guys who have been able to score like Malachi Flynn did, relatively to those numbers. But his ability to just make everybody better made his 17 points so much vastly more important than just 17 points. And you'd have to watch the team to be able to understand and know that. And so I think that's what they're hoping for Ledee. And I think of all of the players that are on their roster, if they're able to go through Ledee and he can have that kind of an impact, I think that's where their ceiling is. And we always talk about that and reaching their ceiling. And it's just exciting. It's exciting because, they're the national runner-ups. And then, talk about this, Andre. What an amazing start to Chris Acker's career as an assistant coach at San Diego State. I mean, the teams that he's been around in just a short time.
Yeah, I mean, the 2020 team and then 2021, they won the conference. I think they were a 5 seed or a 6 seed in the tournament when they lost to Syracuse. And then obviously last year. So yeah, he's had a great run, and he and the rest of the team wants to keep it going.
Absolutely.
So this was hopefully the first of many basketball interviews we'll have on this podcast. We're hoping to get some more, at least another assistant coach and some of the players on here over the next, 6 weeks or so before the team kind of cranks it up for the season. So stay tuned for that. Obviously we're in full-fledged football mode during football season, but we're going to mix in some of these basketball interviews to get some of the basketball fans of the podcast excited as well. So stay tuned for those. As always, we appreciate you guys listening, liking, sharing, following, subscribing on all your favorite platforms. We absolutely appreciate it, and we will talk to you guys next time. You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison.